This one fears is keeping you average, and you don't even know it's controlling you. It's not the fears of spiders or heights or the dark. It's way more dangerous than that. It's the fears of what if, the fears of failure, the fears of looking stupid, the fears of trying your hardest and still falling short. That fears is subtle. It hides inside your decisions. It whispers, play it safe. It smiles and says, just be realistic. And that one quiet voice, it's the reason you feel stuck. It's the reason your dreams seem further away now than they did 5 years ago. But here's the truth nobody tells you that fears. It's lying to you. It wants to keep you in the middle. Not broke, not thriving, not miserable, just comfortable, just average. And that's the most dangerous place to live. I know what that fears feels like. I've heard that voice too. Before I ever walked on a movie set, before the world knew my name, before Fresh Prince or Ali or the Oscars, there was a kid who was scared out of his mind of messing it all up, of disappointing his family, of being laughed at. See, the world doesn't reward people who almost try. The world doesn't remember the ones who stayed in their comfort zone. And neither will you. You will look back and it'll be proud of the chances you took or haunted by the ones you didn't. Let me ask you something. What's the worst that happens if you fail? Really, think about it. You learn, you grow, you adjust. You get back up, bruised but better. But if you let fears win, you stay in the same place year after year after year. And that's a slow death. See, it's not failure that keeps you from winning, it's your fears of failure. That's what traps you in an average life. That's what convinces you to keep dreaming small. And here's the catch, that fears doesn't disappear when you get older. It doesn't fade when you get richer or smarter. It just changes its costume. And it keeps showing up until you face it head on. You know how many people I've met who had insane talent, smart, creative, even more skilled than me, but they're still in the same place they were 10 years ago because they never acted. They never moved. They waited for the fears to go away before they started. Listen to fears is the signal. The fears means you're standing at the edge of something important. And most people, they walk away from that edge. But if you want to be great, if you want more than average, you have to jump while you're scared. You have to move even when your knees are shaking. Because fears will always be there, but so will your future. And you can't have both. I want you to stick with me through this video because I'm about to break this down in a way you've never heard it before. I'm going to show you exactly how fears tricks your mind, how it keeps you chasing comfort instead of chasing growth. And I'm going to give you one shift that changes everything. But first ask yourself, are you living or are you avoiding life? Let's get real for a second. You weren't born afraid. Look at any little kid fearless, jumping off the couch like it's the moon, dancing in the middle of the store with zero shame, singing like they're the next Beyoncé. And then what happens? Somewhere along the way, someone told you, stop that. Tone it down. Don't be weird. And you listened. That's when fear starts moving in. Not like a monster, like a whisper. And that whisper starts shaping your identity. Not based on who you are, but on what you fears. Now you second guess yourself. You shrink your ideas. You hesitate to speak up. You call it being practical, but really you're afraid to look foolish, to fail publicly, to want something big and not get it. But let me tell you something that flipped everything for me. People are too busy judging themselves to be judging you. They're not watching you like you think. They're stuck in their own heads. You're worried about falling in front of them, but most of them ain't even watching the game. The fears of failure is a lie that sounds responsible. That's why it's so dangerous. It wears a suit and tie. It sounds like your parents' advice. It sounds like wisdom, but it's not. It's just dressed up doubt. It's the voice of someone who gave up on their dream, trying to talk you out of chasing yours. And if you listen to it long enough, you'll believe the safest path is the right one. But safety isn't growth, comfort isn't purpose, and average isn't peace, it's just invisible suffering. You think you're avoiding pain by playing small, but the pain of regret is worse. The pain of waking up 10 years from now knowing you could have done something incredible if you weren't so scared of messing up. Let me tell you how I got over that. I stopped chasing perfect. I stopped needing permission. I started chasing growth. And growth, that's messy. That means failing in public. That means launching things that flop. That means hearing no more times than you want. But every time I failed, I learned something people who played it safe never got to learn. See, when I first started rapping, I wasn't the best in the room, but I was the most obsessed. I'd record until 3 a.m., rewrite verses over and over, bomb a performance and come back the next night anyway. And that process, that's how I became dangerous. Because I wasn't afraid of being average anymore. I was afraid of staying average. Let me say that again for somebody who needs to hear it. Being average once is normal. Staying average forever, that's a choice. And that choice comes from fears. The fears that says if I try and fail, it proves I'm not good enough. You got it backwards. The truth is if you don't try, you'll never know who you could have become. And that's what should scare you the most. People think greatness comes from talent. Now greatness comes from the willingness to fail without letting it destroy your identity. You don't become fearless by waiting. You become fearless by acting, by showing up scared, by standing on a stage when your hands are shaking, by hitting publish when your heart's pounding, by saying yes before you're ready. And yeah, you'll take some hits. If you did wrong, people will laugh. But here's what they don't see. Every time you fail and keep going, you get stronger. You stop seeing failure as proof of weakness and start seeing it as evidence of growth. Eventually, you stop fearing failure altogether because you realize the only real failure is standing still. Look, you want the secret to overcoming fears? Here it is. Move anyway. Take the step. Make the call. How you really feel. Apply. Build, launch, not when the fears is gone, but while it's still there. Because fears doesn't disappear with time, it disappears with action. And you don't need a guarantee, you just need to be brave for 10 seconds. Just long enough to act. That's how you beat fears. One bold decision at a time. Let's talk about this idea of being ready. That word is a trap. It sounds noble. Sounds patient, sounds like wisdom, but 9 times out of 10, ready is just fears in disguise. I meet people all the time who say, I'm almost there. I just need to study a bit more. I'm planning my move. Listen, I love preparation, but if you're always preparing and never moving, that's not strategy. That's hesitation. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You need to begin so you can get better. You don't need all the answers. You need one decision, I'm going to try. That's it. That's how everything changes. Nobody is ever truly ready for the next level because every next level demands a different version of you. And you don't become that version by thinking. You become that version by doing. Every big move I ever made, I wasn't ready. When I got the call for the Fresh Prince, I didn't have acting experience. I wasn't trained, but I said yes anyway. And when I stepped on set the first day, I was terrified. But here's what I've learned. Growth only happens when you're outside your comfort zone. That's why fear shows up not to stop you, but to mark the beginning of transformation. Fears is like the gatekeeper to greatness. You don't get through without meeting it first. And most people, they see that fears and they turn around. But the ones who win, they push through that gate, shaking, sweating, second guessing, but they push through anyway because they understand that courage is not the absence of fears, it's action in spite of it. Let's go deeper. Most people live in what I call safe pain. It's the pain of staying where you are. It's quiet, familiar, doesn't make too much noise, but it's still pain. You wake up with it, you carry it around, you go to bed with it. That small late, that nagging whisper that says, this isn't the life you were meant to live. But because it's not loud, you ignore it. You numb it with distractions. You cover it up with routine. And you convince yourself maybe this is just how life is. But let me tell you, that's not life. That's settling. That's fears winning. You're not here to just pay bills and get by. You're to create, to serve, to grow, to stretch, to give this world something only you can give. But that version of you, it lives beyond the fears. Now, I want you to imagine something. Imagine the version of you that didn't let fears make decisions. What would they look like? What would they say yes to? What would they walk away from? You see, your future self is watching you. Not with judgment, but with hope. They're hoping you take the leap. They're hoping you stop hiding. Because they can't exist unless you decide to grow. There's a version of you out there that's thriving, confident, clear, free. And the only thing standing between you and them is fears. Let me give you a real-world example, not a celebrity, not a billionaire. Just a regular dude I met on set. He was working behind the scenes. Camera grip, never spoke much. One day, I asked him about his story. He told me he used to be a writer, had dreams of directing, wrote screenplays at night. But when his first short film bombed online, he deleted all his work. Told himself he wasn't cut out for it. Took a safe job behind the camera. 15 years later, he's still there. Not because he wasn't talented, but because fears convinced him to stop. Now every day he walks past the dream he gave up on. That's the cost of fears. It doesn't just pause your life, it rewrotes it. So let me ask you, what are you leaving on the table because of fears? What ideas are you sitting on? What relationships are you avoiding? What dreams have you delayed so long you've started to call them unrealistic? Don't fall for that trap. Fears doesn't care about your potential. It only wants your comfort. And it will trade your destiny for a little bit of security. But you don't have to accept that deal. Not today, not ever. You can decide right now to stop letting fears be the loudest voice in your head. To stop giving it your future in exchange for your present comfort. To move, to build, to show up, even if your voice shakes. Even if your knees wobble. Because that's the beginning of freedom. Let me break this down with something simple. Fears is a habit. It's not just a reaction, it's a routine. You've trained your brain to expect the worst, to see risk and immediately imagine pain. You've rehearsed every version of failure, but not once sat down and imagined success in detail. Why is that? Why is it easier for us to picture everything falling apart than it is to imagine things going right? I'll tell you why. Because fears is repetitive. It runs the same loop. And if you don't interrupt that loop, it becomes your lifestyle. You don't even call it fears anymore. You call it being careful. You call it being realistic. But underneath all that logic is a scared version of you running the show. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if fears wasn't deciding for you? If it wasn't fears choosing your job, your relationships or income, your identity? Most people let fears set their limits. It becomes the fence around their life. You want to build something bigger, but fear says stay inside the fence. You want to love deeper, but fear says protect yourself. You want to be seen, but fear says, what if they reject you? You keep obeying it and soon the fence becomes your world. But here's the truth. That fence isn't real. It's just a story. And the moment you stop believing it, you realize you've been free the whole time. I remember this moment clearly. There was a scene in one of my films, a stunt that required me to jump from a platform. The crew gave me harnesses, spotters, safety checks. All I had to do was jump. But I froze. My brain flooded with everything that could go wrong. And in that moment, I wasn't Will Smith the actor. I was a scared kid again. But here's what got me through it. I asked myself, what's actually happening right now and what's just in my head? And I realized 99 of my fears was imaginary. The danger wasn't real, just the possibility of it. The fears of maybe, the fears of what if. And the moment I stepped off that platform, I didn't just land safely, I broke a mental chain. Because I proved to myself that fears is allowed, but it's not truth. If you're watching this and you feel stuck, not just stuck in your situation, but stuck in your identity, let me tell you, you don't have to be who you were yesterday. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to surprise people, including yourself. But that takes courage. That takes choosing a new story over the familiar one. And that takes confronting the one fears that's been quietly running your life. Maybe it's the fears of judgment, the fears of rejection, the fears of being misunderstood, or maybe it's just the fears of being seen, because being seen means being vulnerable. And vulnerability is scary until you realize it's where your power lies. You know what changed my life? I stopped chasing acceptance, and I started chasing alignment. That's the difference between living for others and living in your truth. When you're aligned, you stop needing approval. You stop needing applause. You stop waiting for the world to clap before you start performing. You start showing up as you fully, boldly. Not because you're fearless, but because you finally understand that fears is just data. It's just a signal that you're standing at the edge of something important. And when you learn to respond to fears with movement, that's when everything shifts. I've seen this in real people, not celebrities, not billionaires, just folks who got tired of waiting, tired of feeling small, tired of walking past the life they knew they were meant to live. I met a woman at a speaking event, single mom, 3 kids, barely surviving. She told me she had a dream to start her own design studio. But every time she got close, fears would pull her back. Not because she wasn't talented, but because she'd been told her whole life that security came first. That passion was a luxury. That dreaming big was irresponsible. Until one day, she decided to ignore that voice. She started small. She posted her work. She offered her service. She got rejected. She failed, but she kept going. Fast forward 2 years, she's booked out. Her kids are proud, and for the first time, she feels alive. That's not luck. That's what happens when you stop letting fears speak louder than your calling. So here's what I want you to do tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. Write down the one thing you've been putting off because you're scared. The thing that lights your soul up, but also terrifies you. And then make a decision, one step. One action, one bold move. Because momentum kills fears. And clarity comes from doing, not waiting. Let me tell you what happens when you finally stop letting fears be the author of your story. You start living like you were meant to. Not surviving, not pretending, not adjusting to fit into small spaces. You start walking into rooms without shrinking. You start speaking without rehearsing 1,000 apologies in your head. You start building without needing the blueprint to be perfect. And the crazy part, the fears doesn't vanish, just stops being the driver. That's when the game changes. Because once you taste that version of yourself, the bold one, the clear one, The one who moves instead of waiting. You can't go back. You can't settle for small again. Average stops feeling safe. And fear starts feeling like the alarm clock it really is. I've had people ask me, Will, how did you know you make it? The answer is simple, I didn't. I didn't have proof. I didn't have guarantees. What I had was a decision. I decided I wasn't going to be ruled by fears. I decided that even if I failed, I was going to fail forward. I was going to learn, adapt, and come back sharper. Because you know what's scarier than failure? Looking back at your life and realizing you never really lived it. Let that sink in. You can get to the end of your time here and still be full of untouched potential. Dreams that died quiet, gifts that stayed boxed up, and a soul that never got the chance to breathe. That's what fears cost you, not just your peace, but your purpose. You were born with something this world needs. Your story, your voice, your truth. But fears wants to convince you that your story's not good enough, that your voice isn't ready, that your truth is too much or not enough. And if you believe that you don't just rob yourself, you rob everyone who needed to hear what only you could say. That's why this matters. You breaking through fears isn't just for you. It's for your kids. It's for your future. It's for the people who never know your name but will be changed by what you create, what you share, what you survive. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be faithful to the fire in you, to the version of you that knows average ain't your destiny. Comfort isn't your home. And fears has had the mick for long enough. Listen, you were not built to be safe. You were built to grow, to stretch, to step into rooms you were once scared to enter and speak in voices you once thought were too small to matter. And yeah, fears will still show up. But now you know something most people don't. Fears is not a stop sign. It's that what you're about to do matters. So, when you feel fears, smile, because you're on the edge of something that could transform your life. That edge right there, that's where the average get off the ride. And the bulls, they buckle up. If you stuck with me this far, you're not average. You're hungry. You're ready. And I want you to remember this. Fears of failure is just proof you're aiming at something bigger than where you are now. That's a good thing. That means you're growing. And growth always feels like resistance right before the breakthrough. Keep moving, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because what's waiting for you on the other side of fears isn't just success, it's freedom. It's clarity. It's your real life finally catching up to you. Now, if this hit something inside you, if this made you think deeper, if it reminded you that fears has been driving the car for too long, then don't stop here. You need to watch the next video. Everything shifts after this moment. Will Smith Motivation, because trust me, it's not just a follow-up. It's a reveal of what happens when you finally choose to live bold. And before you go, you know what we're about. We are wisdom recorder, your knowledge source. If you're ready for more truth, more tools, more power to break free from what's holding you back, subscribe and like this video right now. You're not alone. You're just getting started.